They're very fitting for a lot of these tiers. But there's a team that's sub-Super Bowl ceiling, which I kind of agree with all of that.
Okay.
However, the Minnesota Vikings, you got to move them up.
Vikings guys.
You got to move them up. This is, when I look above them and I see my beloved Texans, who they beat.
They did.
I mean, absolutely embarrassed. And, the team next to them. The 49ers? You know what? They played them too. So let's take a look at how they beat these teams. It's been their defense, but look at this defense. I'm talking allowing only 10 points a game. That's second in the league. Rushing yards per game. That's second in the league. Well, they get after the quarterback better than anybody. They pressure the quarterback better than anybody. Things you got to do to have success on defense. And the main thing, take the ball away. Well, they do that pretty doggone good too. Brian Flores has been able to disrupt everything that every opponent is trying to get done. We thought it was a fluke because it was the Giants in week 1. Then when he did it against Purdy in that offense and Kyle Shanahan, it was like, oh my goodness. And then he does it again in the following week to CJ Stroud in that offense. It is real. And let's move to why this offense is good in my opinion. Sam Darnold. Like, you don't want to give him credit. But when you've gone up against that type of a defense all offseason in training camp, you get a little bit better. You just learn a lot. You've seen so much that what.
I'm going to let this clip play, but this right here is proof that Sam Darnold is not fool's gold. Versus the blitz. Completion percentage 85.7, 246 pass yards, 3 touchdown to interception ratio, 158.3. That is how you know it's not fool's gold. Because a coach is going to be able to help the quarterback with the blitz big time. You know, the offensive coach, offensive coordinator, whichever it may be. And we know that's what Kevin O'Connell is able to help Sam Darnold do, of course. But you can't fake it. It's not you fake it till you make it. It can't be this legit, this high, okay? It doesn't matter who your coach is. It doesn't matter what type of hot streak. Unless this is just a true hot streak, you just can't fake it like this. It's just going up against the blitz and the pressure. It becomes so unfakeable, honestly. It really is. It's why we see these young rookie quarterbacks versus the blitz, and it just becomes too much for them most of the time, especially if they don't have the mobility to escape. So to me right here, this is it right here, as well as showing the defense, because people keep thinking that the Minnesota Vikings are set up to pop, and that's why I actually isolated this clip, and I want to talk about it more deeply. But when you see what the defense is doing, that's irrelevant to what they're doing offensively, of course. And then you talk about, look how good Sam Darnold is. You can't even beat him on the blitz. Not to mention, he doesn't even have all his weapons, Addison, TJ. Like, it's just this idea that everyone just thinks that the Minnesota Vikings are just fool's gold and that Sam Darnold is fool's gold and pumpkin watch and that they're going to pop. It doesn't actually make sense. There's no actual logical reason to believe that except for your own opinion that's not really based on anything substantial. It's just based on who you think the Vikings have been, combined with who you think Sam Darnold is, based on what he did with the New York Jets, failing organization for decades, and the Carolina Panthers, failing organization for decades. So it doesn't hold up.
What oppositions are now going to throw out there on the field, it's simplified. It's not chaotic. And so when you look at his completion percentage, that's going to be up. His yards per, all these things.
It's a perfect passer rating.
Third down, they're really good in third down as well. Sam Darnold, albeit you have him on pumpkin watch, his team is good. And matter of fact, last year, they were with two guys that they aren't even at full strength with yet, and that's Addison and Hockenson. So we're talking about an offense, a quarterback that's going to get additional help coming soon. And these two guys, look at the amount of targets. Now, albeit Justin Jefferson missed a lot of those games, so they had to step in, and they did a great job as we're looking at right now. But when they get these two guys back, how much better can this offense get? The Vikings need to move up in the tiers.
Wow.
So, it's a compelling case across the board. And one would think it's really dispositive that they beat head up and beat soundly the Texans and the Niners.
Yeah.
The problem is, and I don't know if I've ever shared this, but the committee, one thing we do every committee meeting near the end before we set the tiers in stone, when you're talking about the top teams, we say, all right, everyone close your eyes. Can you picture that quarterback hoisting the Lombardi Trophy.
Confetti test.
Can you? The confetti test. And after that exercise,
Everyone opens their eyes.
You open your eyes, and everyone said, guys, were we all think, was there a guy missing? And they said, yeah, Darnold.
I mean,
and so.
Well, Greg does
Wilds.
That's a solid.
It is true. I'll be honest. Now I will say that did Brew really make fools of the committee one time ever. Nick Foles. There was one time that the Eagles we dropped him repeatedly, and so it's not foolproof, but it's pretty solid. So Greg, you make a good point, but doesn't pass the confetti.
And that's why, and I'm glad he brings up Nick Foles, because it's actually a perfect example of why you have to understand what it takes to win in football, what it takes to win a Super Bowl. There's this idea that Nick Foles got lucky in the Super Bowl. And the truth is that's not true at all. Nick Foles, when he first started his career, his first stint with the Philadelphia Eagles, was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Should have won the MVP. He stepped up a little bit late. I forget how many games he ended up playing. But he had, and I don't remember all the stats, but he only ended up throwing like one interception that whole season. He played like 9+ games or so, was unbelievable. Should have been the MVP, completely saved the Eagles that season. And his one interception came against the Detroit Lions in an absolute insane blizzard of a snowstorm. One of those games where you're like, how are they even playing this game right now? But played unbelievable. I believe he's tied with Peyton Manning for the most touchdowns in a single game. It's like 7 or 8 touchdowns or something. And as well as most completions, like most consecutive completions. He either has the record, broke the record, or is like one shy. He's within that range of some sort. And then he obviously gets to the Eagles again for a second stint. Demolishes the Minnesota Vikings. Sorry, Minnesota Vikings fans. I'm sure you guys are actually probably a little sensitive about that, but demolished the Minnesota Vikings and then lights up the Patriots, wins the Super Bowl, gets Super Bowl MVP. And then the following year, he's able to then lead the Eagles again as a backup quarterback against the Saints, had that game won, was leading a game-winning drive, and it ended up being intercepted all because of the wide receiver. It like went right through his hand, like just either tipped his hands or just went right through his hands. Clearly not his fault whatsoever, but was leading another game-winning drive after he had already led in another game against the Giants a game-winning drive. So when all of those things happen, right, collectively, you can't say that someone like Nick Foles just got lucky, right? If it was just one game where he went into the Super Bowl and lit it up, then you could say, yeah, he got lucky, right? Any quarterback can be on fire at any given moment, right? No matter who you are, even a third-string quarterback can still have their moment. But when Nick Foles does this in the NFC Championship game, in the Super Bowl, in the following year, again, he played great against the Saints in that game. Really, really great. You could really blame play calling that really kind of messed things up. And, of course, just the missed pass for the game-winning drive. He was leading them back to the NFC Championship game, as well as what he then did years prior with the Eagles when he was just a kid, essentially. You have to take it all into consideration. Again, having all those touchdowns, the completions. If it was just one of those things, right? Again, even a backup quarterback could theoretically just have himself a day and throw for 10 touchdown passes, 10 passes, 10 touchdowns. But to be able to put this all together, when you have all of these things, you say, well, who is this quarterback then? He obviously has the ability to touch eliteness of true greatness, but he obviously doesn't have the ability to sustain it. Right? So he's clearly not an all-time great. He's clearly not a Mahomes or a Tom Brady, but he can still touch these moments, which means he's not a scrub, which means he's not lucky. It's not just good fortune, good timing. You can't say that. And so that's why it's always a fascinating argument to me of trying to figure out how do we define greatness, eliteness, good, because it's such a fascinating spectrum. And I talk about this so many times about how sometimes someone is really great because they're just consistently great and they can't touch elite. Sometimes you have someone who's just good, but they're so inconsistent, even though sometimes they can even touch elite levels, but they can't do it. They can do it one game out of 10, and it's so inconsistent. So to me, it's always a fascinating argument, and in a lot of ways, there's no right or wrong answer. And the reason why I'm going on a whole Nick Foles rant is because people are thinking Sam Darnold is just lucky right now. And the levels of success and what Sam Darnold is doing right now, to me, is not what luck is. right? The way that it's all unfolding and the way in which he's doing it and who he's doing it with is not luck. It's not to say that he's going to now turn into a top 2 quarterback in the NFL. Like, that's not necessarily the argument that I'm trying to make. The real argument that I'm trying to make is that Sam Darnold is not on pumpkin watch. It's not a pumpkin watch situation. It's not a fool's gold situation. The Minnesota Vikings aren't set to implode because, and this is why I emphasize the defense as well and the coaching of Kevin O'Connell, because even if Sam Darnold comes back down to earth like a Nick Foles, right? Because Nick Foles is not going to be able to outduel Tom Brady every single game, but he's clearly good enough to step up when it matters and be big in the moments that matter and win you a Super Bowl and become the Super Bowl MVP, right? That is clearly possible for, say, a Nick Foles. And so my argument is that it's shaping up to be possible. We can't say with certainty, but we can say that it's shaping up to be that, yeah, the Minnesota Vikings, they don't need him to be this all-time great to continue to win, especially once they add in their missing pieces, because the defense is ferocious right now, stopping real formidable teams, right? Not scrubs, not just the Giants and the Browns and the Patriots. Like, they're stopping real teams, and Sam Darnold is having real success. He's not just taking advantage of just bad defenses or the fact that, yeah, you know what, could have been a couple tips that could have been intercepted, but he got lucky, and now that adds an extra 100 yards to his passing yards or whatever. Like, you can always point when sometimes you see a backup quarterback having success, and sometimes it's just a hot streak, sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's playing bad teams. Like, it could be a collection of so many different variables. But again, to me, when I'm looking at his numbers versus the blitz, to me that is such a big indicator of, like, this is not fool's gold, combined with the defense, with Kevin O'Connell being a top coach in the NFL. If Sam Darnold just continues to play like a top 10, or dare I even just say a top 15 quarterback, the Minnesota Vikings are for real. If he's just a top 15 quarterback and you just need him to be really solid game in and game out and just not give away the game, they can win. They can. I mean, we've seen quarterbacks do it before, where they haven't had their amazing top level games. We've seen the GOATs not have, their best games ever, and yet they still can win because of the coaching, the pieces around them, the defense, the run game, whatever it may be. But we've seen some amazing, unbelievable quarterbacks not even particularly play that well, whether it's Patrick Mahomes, whether it's Aaron Rodgers, whether it's Tom Brady, whatever it may be, and yet they still were able to win without, like, a true top 5 performance. And then we've seen other quarterbacks have legit top 5 all-time great performances and still lose. Tom Brady against the Eagles, ironically, right? Like, we've seen that before. So that's why it's just, when you actually have a complete team and you're not just being led by a quarterback hot streak, which is what the Bengals were. Because people say, what about the Bengals and Jake Browning and all that? Yeah, that was fool's gold for many reasons. One of them being that they were able to kind of get wins and get momentum because Browning was on such a hot streak and their defense was still trash and their offense still had a lot of issues going on. So yeah, that was more fool's gold. Same thing with even the Cleveland Browns. They had a defense that I think was really good, but not as good as people really realized. I thought they were a lot better than they were. When I went back and really looked at the numbers, looked at who they were beating and who put up points against them, I'm like, it's not a bad defense by no means, but it's not as elite and ruthless as everyone was originally making it out to be. And so then, which is why they got humbled very quickly against CJ Stroud and the Texans. They were not a complete team. And they were riding on the highs of Joe Flacco. And I think even when they were winning and doing well, I think Joe Flacco was still turning the ball over at a tremendous rate. I could be wrong on that, but I believe that to be true because I think he had a lot of turnovers. That's not what we're seeing with the Minnesota Vikings. Now, granted, it's still a short sample size, right? It's still only 3 games, and I get that. So it's hard to just put all those eggs in that basket. But at the same time, based on the 3 games that I'm seeing, I'm not seeing what's potentially misleading, right? You could make the argument the Packers are technically misleading. I don't believe so, but you can make the argument, hey, they have a backup quarterback who's been playing kind of randomly great, but he's doing it against all bad teams. And you say, okay, yeah, fine, I could buy that. And when they did play a good team or a decent team or a competent team or just not a really bad team, they lost, right? They lost to the Eagles week 1. Like, so you could technically convince yourself and make some arguments of some of these fool's gold situations. The Jets, for instance, right? They did not look good against the 49ers, and now they beat 2 bad teams, and now people are back to being high on them. Even the Buffalo Bills beating 2 bad teams, or just not great teams necessarily, or teams that are firing at all cylinders and really putting up points on them, which is them. You could technically make all those arguments that could mess things up, which I'm all for. I love doing that. That's why I said this in previous videos, that I actually really am starting to love trying to figure out who these teams are early on in the season, because we have such limited information that you have to really kind of be a detective and really dig deep to try to figure it out. And based off of my own observations and understanding of what's happening, and I've watched the Minnesota Vikings very closely, there's just no reason for me to believe, yeah, this looks really good, and I understand why people are high on them, but it's gonna pop soon. It's not gonna work out. I don't see that happening. It would actually genuinely stun me at this point. Sam Darnold would have to just totally be 1,000% fool's gold, or they would have to have like really, really bad injury luck, right? Other than that, I see the Minnesota Vikings as a top contender, and I see Sam Darnold continuing to thrive with that offense and Kevin O'Connell. And again, another massive point, which I've already said a couple times in this video, and Greg said, it's like they're not even full strength offensively. I mean, just imagine what that's going to open up. I can't see how that's going to possibly not open up the playbook even more and give Sam Darnold and Kevin O'Connell even more success. So, yeah, I'm just excited to see how they continue to play and how their story continues to unfold. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Minnesota Vikings and Sam Darnold being on Pumpkin Watch, and how they can't win and Sam Darnold will never win and the Vikings are actually bad and yada, yada, yada? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me. Either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I'd absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.